Hello, and welcome to the Peace at Home Parenting Roundtable, Self-Care, Put on Your Oxygen Mask First. My name is Dana Asby, and I'm a developmental and educational psychology researcher and author. I am the Director of Innovation and Research Support at the Center for Educational Improvement and the Education Coordinator of the New England Mental Health Technology Transfer Center. I'm joined today by Stephanie Rondeau. She's a certified health coach with a background in sports medicine and fitness training. She's also the founder of Rondeau Health and Wellness, offering private health coaching and small group coaching. I'm so pleased to have Stephanie with me here today to talk about the importance of self-care and especially the importance for adults to take care of their own well-being before trying to take care of the young people that they are parenting or teaching. So Stephanie, I would love to hear what you've been doing during these stressful times this past year to take care of yourself.
So yeah, this last year has been very hard. It's been very hard for everyone, for parents, for non-parents, even those of us who have special kind of training in how to take care of ourselves. It's just been very difficult. So I have been really focused on making sure that I have scheduled time. I try to do at least 4 days a week of, solo fitness for myself. Some days that's only 20 minutes. Some days I'm really lucky and I get an hour, and that's wonderful. But that to me is a very big and very important de-stressor. It's a really important part of my wellness plan. It's something I really enjoy. It's not a chore to me. So, that is a really huge priority of mine, even when we get really busy. And I'm really lucky to have a partner in my husband who really values that as well. And so we work together to make sure that we each have our own separate fitness time and we take over duties with the kids. We have 2 young kids. So that's a big one. I also have a couple of passion projects that I've really been focusing on making time for myself, which is something I haven't always done in the past. So even if it's, just half an hour at night after the kids go to bed, I've been trying to make time for those things for myself pretty much every day and just give myself some time to really focus my brain and focus my energy on something that I'm really passionate about and something that's really making me happy. So, those are the 2 probably key things that have been keeping me afloat, I feel like, during this past crazy year.
Absolutely. That's so great. I feel like I have relied a lot on my yoga practice as a self-care tool, getting that fitness, but also a little mindfulness component in there. And I wish that I could say that I focused on my passion projects, but I've been a little overwhelmed with work during the pandemic. But I love that you brought that up because creativity is such an important way for us to express ourselves. And sometimes when we get older and move into adulthood, careers, families, we forget how important taking care of our creative life is and making time for that. So I know that you have a lot of responsibilities. You're a very busy woman. So how do you make sure that you get that 5 minutes for your passion project or 20 minutes for fitness each day? That's really impressive.
Thank you. So I use a paper planner. I'm a pen and paper girl. I can't rely on the calendar on my phone because I will forget everything. So I write everything down. I schedule time for my workouts. I schedule time for my writing, which is, my big kind of passion thing. I schedule time for little things like that. I even try to schedule social time. I don't plan every minute of my life out, but I like to, for things that I feel like are really important, I try to get them into my calendar because I know that, once you get into the busy day, things get pushed to the wayside. Something else always seems more important in the moment. And we tend to, throughout the day as parents, especially, we start doing everything for everyone else. And then you kind of push everything you were going to do to the side. And that's just kind of part of what we do. And so, kind of like the pile of laundry that just gets like shoved over to the side when things get crazy. So, I think it's just, for me, very important to schedule. And I know other people don't like to feel that kind of rigid and they like things to be more fluid. So people have to do what works for them.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that what you said about pushing things to the side is really universal, especially with caregivers. And I've found for me, if I want to get my passion project, my meditation, my journaling in, I need to do it right when I wake up in the morning. I've tried to get my yoga practice or fitness in at the end of the day, but by then I'm so exhausted from work and I just want to sit on the couch watching TV and prop my feet up. So I've found personally that that works better for me. But what you mentioned about everyone finding their own flow and when it makes sense for them, maybe making time during their lunch break or between work and picking up the kids from school or activities, that can be a really powerful time. And I actually make some alarms in my phone each
Ooh.
day. I look at my calendar and I find those little moments during the day where you have like 10 minutes between meetings or just 20 minutes to spend some time to reset and breathe and relax. It can be so much more energizing and empowering to get you through the rest of your day or your week. So I love that you brought that up. So you said that you do fitness and you do your passion project. And you mentioned that those are things that you do by yourself. Is there anything that you do as a family that helps you reset and restore and also teaches those skills to your children?
Definitely. We as a family, we very much value the outdoors and we spend a lot of time outdoors. We're very lucky to live in a community that has some really great outdoor resources. We have a beautiful lake in town. We have really nice hiking trails and we live on a very quiet street, so our kids are able to ride their bikes and scooters and things like that. And so my biggest thing for sanity and for, kind of wellness for everyone, not just for myself, is we get outside as much as we can. If we're having a tough day and if tensions are running high and people don't seem to be listening and no one seems to be cooperating, we get right outside because it usually it almost hits a reset button.
Mm-hmm.
If we can get someone riding a bike, if I can just walk around and breathe some fresh air, I think, even if you're not doing anything, I think just being in the fresh air can be really rejuvenating for everyone, for kids, for parents. It can be energizing. It's also really fun with kids, especially to explore. We have a lot of fun just walking around. We'll walk around our garden every single day. And it's been really fun this spring because we just moved here last summer. So this is our first spring in this house. So it's been really fun to walk around the garden. Sometimes we're crawling around. We look at, anything new that's popped up overnight. We look at new flowers that are blooming. We find worms. We find bugs. We do all this little stuff that doesn't require going anywhere or doing anything specific, but it's really great bonding time. It's really great. It's educational for the kids to just learn about the outdoors and gardening. And it's also just really, it's one of those kind of self-care, energizing things for me. And that's something we really enjoy. How about you? What do you guys do?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, everything you're saying about spending time outdoors is really resonating. During the pandemic, I moved from Brooklyn to Connecticut, and it's been really amazing to have access to so many great mountains and state parks and the beach. And I've definitely relied on getting outside to help me reset and feel rejuvenated and restored. And there's so many great things about nature that help you feel grounded, really bring you back to reality in that present moment and realize that the deadlines and all of the work don't really matter because what's really important is that life cycle of just being a human on the earth with everyone else. I know that during the summer, especially taking walks by the beach was really powerful for me because just seeing the waves coming in and out really helped remind me to let things go. And
very meditative. Yeah.
Yeah, it really is. I love it. So I know that for me, I practice a lot of mindfulness, and I rely on mindfulness as a really big self-care tool. And you did mention that you also meditate. I'm curious to know, where do you get your inspiration from meditations? Do you use any apps or books or anything like that?
I actually don't use any specific apps. I wouldn't consider myself a structured meditator. I like to, I find it very energizing to spend time in nature and in quiet and kind of in solitude. And I try to do that for a few minutes at a time. Even if we're having family time outside, sometimes I can spend a few minutes at the end just kind of sitting and breathing. I find deep breathing to be very, very effective and very calming. We try to teach that and model that for our kids too, so they can kind of feel that. I sometimes it's just in the evening before I go to bed, I put away the screens, I put away the phone, I turn off the TV, and I'll sit in quiet and just do maybe a 5-minute quick meditation before bed. A lot of times that's all I can do before I'm ready to go to sleep. But so I don't follow any specific apps right now. I have done a fair amount of reading on mindfulness, but I can't think of any specific books that come to mind. A lot of articles and it's smaller publications like that. But it's more of for me, I feel like that's less of a structured part of my wellness and more of a, when it fits and when it feels right is, that's kind of how meditation is for me.
Yeah, I love hearing about how people approach mindfulness from different ways. And I really applaud you for coming at it from your own personal way. I'm a more structured person. So when I first got introduced to mindfulness, I definitely read books and got the Headspace app and followed all of the practices. But now that I've been doing it for several years, I do enjoy doing more walking meditations. That's something that's really accessible to people, is to leave that phone behind and go out on a walk and just start to notice things and say in your head what you're seeing. Oh, there's a beautiful flower. Oh, there's that. I hear a bird chirping. That can be really meditative. But anything, like you said, could include meditation when you're out in the forest and you just take a moment to take a few deep breaths and come back to that present moment. It's so incredibly powerful.
Yeah.
And you mentioned the breath. And the breath, I feel, is one of our best self-care tools, because our breath actually helps calm not just our body down, making the heart slow down and maybe stopping some of that sweating, but also to calm our brains down as well. So that's a great SOS tool that I love to teach parents and teachers about, is how to just stop and take a deep breath. And that can really help us take care of ourselves. I'm curious too, since you are a health coach, do you have any tips around healthy eating that might help improve our self-care?
Yeah, it's tough because I think that healthy eating and nutrition can very easily, there's a fine line, and I think it very easily can become a point of stress for people. And that's the last thing that we want to do, is, kind of give people hard and fast rules that are going to stress them out. And so in general, when I try to help people find, a better place of health through their nutrition, I really like people to focus on the positive. So not focusing on eliminating food groups or eliminating, times of day when they're eating or anything like that. I really like people to focus on finding food that fuels them and makes them feel really good. Finding different types of nutrition that give you different experiences, whether that's new textures, new flavors, new methods of cooking, new recipes to try with your family. I think those are all very important things. But I think the most important thing when it comes to nutrition, especially when we're in these really stressful times, is to try to, if you do have changes that you want to make, I always recommend that people make very small changes first. a lot of people try to make these big sweeping changes and they'll change their entire diet overnight. And that becomes incredibly overwhelming. It becomes very stressful. You know, it might be something that you can stick with that for maybe a week, maybe a couple days. But then it becomes incredibly stressful because you're changing a huge part of your life all in one sweep. And so I really try to encourage very small changes at first, finding little areas where you can create more positive habits, whether that's drinking a glass of water first thing when you wake up in the morning to kind of jumpstart hydration throughout the day, you know, putting your healthier snacks in some clear containers at eye level in your pantry so that when you go searching for food, that is what you see and that's what your brain is going to kind of connect to first. You know, little changes like that where we're not saying you're going to eliminate carbs or you're going to stop eating after 7 p.m. or you're going to, you know, skip breakfast or, you know, all these crazy things that people do. And I think just little tiny changes as they become more comfortable and as they become habits. And this also, it's funny because this very much and very heavily ties into mindfulness, because I have found with myself and with clients that the most long-lasting changes that people have when it comes to nutrition are very much tied to mindfulness and understanding hunger versus, you know, true hunger cues, being mindful of what that feels like versus eating out of stress or other emotions. You know, being mindful of, do you really want something? Are you eating it out of habit? Are you eating it because you're stressed? You know, it's little mindful choices like that. And so I think when people are able to start a mindfulness practice in other areas of their life and also utilize it with nutrition, it can be a huge game changer and a huge help.
Absolutely. Yeah. I totally understand what you're saying, because I know that I've tried dieting in the past, but then when you're depriving yourself of something that you really enjoy, that feels like a punishment. But if you're just, you know, like you said, trying to form these healthy habits over time, slowly, that's so much more effective. I know something that has helped me during the pandemic, since I've been working from home and living in home and everything happens in my home, is just thinking about where I put snacks and what those snacks are, and having some fresh fruit on my desk and having that to grab is so much healthier than having some candy in my drawer. And I don't think about it. It's something that's automatic after I formed that habit over time. And I see in the chat that Pam has said that if she prepares healthy foods ahead of time, then she can grab it and go. And that's so much easier. And I totally agree. So I wonder, you know, with parents and you have kids, you need to think ahead of all of the things that they need to eat. Do you have any tips when you're out and about for how to incorporate healthy eating as a self-care practice for your children as well?
Sure. And I just want to go back a second to the kind of, you know, when you have healthier food out at eye level, it's very true that we have very finite amount of willpower, self-control during the day. So if you have, and I use this example a lot, but it's very true. If you have a bowl of candy on your table that you're walking by every single time you pass through the dining room or where, you know, on your desk, wherever it is, every single time you see that, whether or not you notice it, whether or not you realize it, your brain has to make a decision. Yes, I want some, or no, I do not want some. And every single time you walk through there, your brain is making that decision, and your willpower level is going down a tiny bit every single time. So you get to the end of the day, maybe 3 p.m., that post-lunch slump, you walk by it one more time, and your willpower might be down to here. And at that point, you might just grab a few pieces of candy and go. And, you know, that's not the end of the world. I eat candy, but it might be something if you're trying to eat healthier, and that might be something that makes you feel a little bit more negative later. And so if it's a lot of times when things are out of sight, out of mind, you know, you might go all day without even thinking about it. So it's just, that's kind of a little thing that people can be conscious of. Just, you know, like you said, where you put food and what types of food you put out in view. So then moving to your most recent question, as we talk about, you know, being out with our families, and encouraging healthy snacking and everything. I find it very important to, like Pam said, I like to prepare foods ahead of time. I have a nice kind of list in my head of snacks that are a little bit more protein filled, that are going to keep people more full, myself, my kids, my family. So taking a few minutes at the beginning of the week to prepare a few things ahead of time, and to kind of have a plan where I know if we're going out and we're going to be out for 3 hours, the kids are 100% going to need snacks. There's no way around it. So preparing ahead of time for that. Some of the snacks we bring aren't as healthy. Some of that is just stuff that the kids really like, but preparing things like chopping up some carrots and having little containers of carrots and hummus ready to go, so that you don't have to chop and put hummus in a container when you're trying to get everybody out the door. Doing a few containers of that at the beginning of the week. Maybe making a few little baggies at the beginning of the week, and each one has a cheese stick and a handful of nuts and a granola bar, something like that. So then you have kind of these little grab and go packages throughout the week, where that might be your breakfast one day if you're running really late and you need something satisfying, or it might be a great, you might make a few of those that'll be great snacks for your kids, because, at least for me, I pick them up from school and from daycare at the end of the day. And a lot of times we'll go right to the playground for about an hour. And I have to have snacks with me for them, but I'm coming straight from work. So it has to be something easy that I could have grabbed, early that morning on our way out the door. So I think, people get really overwhelmed when we start to talk about meal prep and about prepping foods ahead of time, but it doesn't have to be a big deal. It doesn't have to be something where you're prepping meals upon meals at the beginning of the week. It can be a few of these little kind of like grab and go snack boxes or snack bags that you have ready just, for the days when you're going to be the busiest. That's probably my biggest tip.
Yeah, absolutely. So I in this conversation that we've had, I've heard a few themes pop up. We've talked a little bit about preparation, intention, and balance. Sort of these three things that as parents and educators, we can start to think about ahead of time. And when we incorporate those things into our lives, it does make the present moment a little bit easier. But sometimes those break down. And especially during the pandemic, I've heard lots of stories of frazzled parents who have too many balls to juggle, and they just don't have literally the brain capacity to think through things in advance like that. And I think that's kind of what we're here today to talk about, is really that importance of pausing and taking time to reset your own emotional well-being, so that you are able to then put in that intention, to have that preparation, and find that balance between trying to do these healthy coping mechanisms, but also allow ourselves some pleasure, because pleasure is a really important part of taking care of ourselves. What are some things during the pandemic that you've really fallen back on to make sure that you're incorporating joy and pleasure into your life?
Yeah. So for me, I really kind of dove in headfirst to some writing projects, which writing is very, very important to me. It's kind of the fuel for my brain. So that is something that I've dove into headfirst. And other than that, like I said, I try to make time for myself. We have tried to really, I know we're talking about self-care here, but we've really tried to make the most of these weird times for our kids, and try to make some fun, creative days for them, whether we go somewhere or not, planning just fun things we can even do in our own yard. I feel like it is something that sometimes I struggle with, is kind of letting go of all the stuff we need to do and finding stuff that is just fun to do instead, that we really enjoy. So again, I go back to, it's just the little things here and there, being able to, especially recently, getting even a quick coffee with a friend, or I last weekend was able to meet up in person with a critique partner for some writing that I do. And it was just such a lovely thing to sit with another adult and have coffee and have great conversation in person, something that you kind of, that I took advantage of, or took for granted before, that we haven't been able to do in so long. And I see a comment here that Pam says, I tried to weed out the things I was doing that I really didn't want to do. And that's a big thing too. I think that this year has really shown us, where it's important to spend our time, who we really want to be spending our time with, and who we want to be spending our energy on. And I think you're absolutely correct in saying that there's a large part of this is balance. We want to work on our health, and we want to do things that are good for our health, and that is self-care. But you're right. The other part of this is pleasure. And, we have this really wonderful ice cream place in town. It's a farm that's a creamery, and they make the most delicious ice cream. And we go there sometimes, and, of course that's not the most healthy thing, but it brings our whole family joy, and it's wonderful. It's something that we've been able to do. They had drive-up service during the worst of the pandemic, which was lovely. So, just finding little things like that trying to, take these moments that we probably took for granted before.
Absolutely. Yeah. And you said two things that I really want to highlight there. You mentioned Pam's comment and us really prioritizing what's most important and how the pandemic has shifted our priorities. And that, to me, speaks to boundaries, and how as adults, it's sometimes really difficult for us to set boundaries and to maintain those boundaries, especially when some of those things that we don't really want to do, we might not have as much control over. But I know if you are lucky enough to work at an organization where the folks in leadership can hear your concerns and desires, that can be really powerful to just find those small little tasks that you have to do as an employee, as a family member, as a friend, and figure out what's not serving you and whether that is something that does need to continue. And I know in my organization, I do work for a really responsive organization, and we look at those things and ask ourselves, is this really helping us achieve our goals? And I think that as parents and educators, we can do the same thing. We can look at the things that are frustrating us and also frustrating our kids. I've heard a lot of parents talk during the pandemic about how they're cutting out sports that they thought their children really, really loved. But then when it came time for the child to re-engage in that sport, they had no interest. And it was really shocking to the parents because they had thought that the child was who wanted to participate in this. But I think sometimes as parents and educators, we don't stop to pause and really look at what's making our family joyful and happy. So I love that you and Pam both pointed that out. And the other thing that I heard you talk about was the excitement of being able to go back in person and have coffee with someone else, that connection with another human being. And we've had these virtual connections, which have been really important during the pandemic. But as we go back into, some new sense of normal, those connections are so powerful. And that is a form of self-care. So we've talked about so many different ways to take care of ourselves. I'm curious how you decide when you need to pull the different self-care strategies. What do you do to figure out what you need in that moment when you're feeling depleted?
So I think as a mom, I stayed home full time with my daughter for 2 years. And now I work my kind of, day job part-time. I do a lot of my own work outside of that. So it's a lot of juggling different things. And so I do have some days where I feel like I have too many balls in the air. I have too much going on. I know that, when my patience start, I can feel myself when my patience starts getting very low, when I start getting kind of elevated at little things that, sometimes I get to a point where it feels like everything is irritating me. If I just, so, in those times when I start to feel those feelings and when I start to feel myself, just kind of, I think elevating is the only word I could just feel like the tension just comes in here. I know that that's time that I need to step back. I either need to, have 20 minutes for myself. I need to read a book. Sometimes that's all I want to do is just sit in quiet and read a book. Sometimes what I need for self-care is just to lay on the couch with the kids and snuggle and read some good picture books with them. So it really kind of depends on the day and what's going on, but it's when I feel that stress building inside me where my patience is very low, my tolerance for normal kid things gets very low. When I start to feel like I'm just kind of scattered and I can't focus on any given thing, if I feel like I can't give my energy to my kids, I know that I need to do something to get I need to fill my cup a little bit, because I mean, it's very cliche, but when you're so depleted and your self cup is empty, you have nothing left to give to your kids and to your family. And so, it's just, I think a lot of my mindful practice helps me realize those moments. And sometimes I wish I could realize it a little bit quicker. That we just need that time to fill our cup. And that's when I, whether it's 5-minute meditation, there was a time recently where, something had happened. And so I just kind of handed the kids to my husband and I said, I need to go for a walk. And I knew that I needed to go for a walk in that moment. And that was just, it was just what it is. And it worked. And I went for about a 20-minute walk and then felt, so much better after that. So it's just feeling learning how to feel that tension rising, feel those moments, and recognizing when you need a little bit more for yourself.
Absolutely. Yeah. It sounded like what you were describing was burnout.
Yeah.
When we reach that point of not being able to rely on our normal self-care practices to reset and find that sense of presence, calm, and balance, but rather needing to take some kind of, drastic measure like getting out of the house and walking. And I know that depending on your past and experiences that you might have had, for some folks, they aren't as lucky as you are to be able to be as intuitive about knowing what they need. And I know that for myself and some of the children that I've worked with, it's been really powerful to be able to connect my feelings to my body. And that helps me understand what I need in the moment. And that might mean if I'm at work or in a public place, just sitting so that my feet touch the floor and maybe grounding my hands on my knees or my shoulders, or giving myself a hug and taking a couple breaths and really figuring out where in my body I'm feeling discomfort and thinking about what might make me feel better. If it's up in my head, maybe it's because I'm overwhelmed with work or stress or emotions, and I might need to take a walk and get that my head clear, like you mentioned. If my chest is really tight and I'm having trouble breathing, sometimes that for me means that it's more emotional and has to do with my relationships, and perhaps journaling might be the self-care practice I need in that moment. So just really taking the time to listen to our bodies, because our bodies are so smart and they often know what we need before our brains do, can be really powerful. And for me, I like to think of self-care as kind of a formula or an equation. And I have over the years learned the different things that help me feel balanced if I'm getting enough social time, but also enough alone time. If I'm eating whole, healthy foods, but also having some sweets and some salty, snacky foods as well. Getting some exercise, but also getting 7 hours of sleep each night. So trying to think about all of those different elements that when they come together, I'm really happy and energized and feel healthy. And then if I am feeling depleted, I can step back and think, okay, which part of my equation is off? And maybe tomorrow I need to sleep in instead of waking up to get some exercise because I haven't gotten as much sleep this past week. Or, oh, I've really eaten super healthy and maybe I need to give myself a little joy with some cake or ice cream. So that's how I think about it. I'm curious to know your thoughts about that.
Yeah, I love that idea of an equation. Because I think there's such a balance between everything, fitness, nutrition, sleep, stress, family time. I love that idea of an equation where some can be a little bit high, when some get a little bit higher, others get a little bit lower, and how can we find ways to balance those out? I hadn't really thought of it that way before, but it's kind of a great, you can really visualize it, when you start thinking about it that way. So I really like that. I might start using that in my own practice too. I like that a lot. Cause I feel like it's very similar to you, there's sometimes I'll take a whole week off of fitness because there's too much other stuff, everything else is up here. Mm-hmm. And if I add in the fitness, then my stress is through the roof. And so there has to be some give somewhere, there has to be a balance. So looking at all the different pieces of what brings you joy, what brings you stress, what is necessary, and then kind of, taking away and adding on as needed. And sometimes we're a little bit out of balance. Sometimes we're having weeks or days that are a lot more stressful. But then if we can hopefully kind of step back and look at the bigger picture and start to look at that formula for ourselves, whichever are more important and whichever need more attention, if we can kind of step back and feed those, add to those more. I think that can be really helpful.
Yeah. Yeah, I do know, though, that sometimes I fall into the trap of, having that formula and knowing what I need and then still not giving it to myself. And then speaking negatively about myself because I am not practicing what I preach to everyone. And that can be counterproductive because then I have this routine that I've relied on and I get off of it. And I have my inner critic in my head telling me that I haven't done a good job at XYZ. And then I give up and it's a month before I reestablish that habit. So I've been trying really hard to reframe my thinking, especially during the pandemic, and give myself a break and remind myself that to use self-compassion and to remind myself that I'm trying my best and that everyone is a little overwhelmed during this time. And even as we go back into our sense of normalcy, it's difficult and there are emotions that we have to process and integrate. So I wonder if you have any tips for parents and teachers about how not to be our own worst critic.
Yeah, that's one of the most challenging things, I think, for anyone who is looking at or who has any goals as it comes to fitness or nutrition or even self-care, any kind of, anything under the umbrella of wellness. We are always our own worst critics. We a lot of times tell ourselves we aren't doing enough. We get upset with ourselves if we have a down week or a down day or anything like that. And so the biggest thing I'd like to impress upon people is that no matter where you're starting and no matter what your goals are, there is no perfect line to get there. There's always going to be ups and downs. There's always going to be things that get in the way, whether you're trying out a new nutrition plan or whether you're trying to start exercising again, there's always going to be ups and downs and barriers and challenges. And that's totally normal. And I think a lot of times that people get bogged down in those details, and I don't want to call them little because they are significant. When you meet a challenge in your goal and in your plan, it is significant. But in the grand scheme of things, it's a detail. And if you kind of view all of your goals and your wellness as a whole as a puzzle, and each piece is a different thing. Each piece might be one of your short-term goals, or it might be a barrier to success, or it might be some habits you're creating to reach that goal, or anything along those lines. Any one of those pieces, if you look at it on its own, if you're looking at a real puzzle, physical puzzle in front of you, you look at one piece and you don't necessarily know what the whole picture is. It's not until you kind of put the whole thing together and you look at the whole picture that it looks like something significant. And so when people have these down days or these down weeks, or you think, oh God, I didn't work out for 3 days in a row, it's horrible. Look at it forget that detail. Look at it in the bigger picture, and look at the fact that for the past 3 months, you have been moving more and you have been exercising more. These 3 days don't matter. They matter in terms of, how you feel today, but in the grand scheme of things, they don't make you any less likely to reach your goals. They don't make you any less successful. They don't make you any less of a person. You have to kind of take a step back and look at everything that's going on. Maybe you're not able to get those workouts in because you're in a very, very stressful time right now, and you have to give yourself a little bit of grace. And so there's a lot of different things that play into this. I really like to encourage people to reframe these negative thoughts that they have in a positive way. If you are thinking to yourself daily, like, oh God, I have to work out today, it's such a chore, and it starts to feel like such a chore. If you can reframe that and kind of train yourself and say, I get to work out today. I get 20 minutes to myself. I'm going to feel strong. I'm going to feel sweaty. I'm going to feel energized. That's a totally different attitude. And whether you're saying that to yourself or you're saying it to your kids, that makes it, it's a completely different attitude around fitness and around health. So really reframing things. And I also think it's really important for people to set goals, set small steps that you need to take to reach those goals, because if we don't have any specific goals, we don't really know if we're making any progress. When you have specific goals and you have little steps to get there, then you can nick little checks along the way. Okay, I did this, I did this, I did this. I'm making steps toward my goal. And it's a huge motivating factor to be able to see even little bits of progress.
Absolutely. And I see in the chat that Allie's asked for 3 things that she could do tomorrow to implement this mindset. And I was pulling some things out while you were talking, Stephanie. I noticed that you mentioned during that reframing process being grateful for all of the progress that you have made. Research has shown that just writing down 3 things that we're grateful for each day can really improve our mood. And it also helps us reflect on the progress that we have made. So just writing down 3 things that you're grateful for is one way you could do. Do you have another idea for Allie that she could implement this mindset?
I do. One thing that people can do is write down, 1, 2, or 3 positive mirror mantras that you can say to yourself in the mirror. And I know, we think about the viral video of the little girl who would kind of, jump in front of the mirror and say, I am great, I am wonderful. And that's something that I think we can honestly do. You don't have to dance in front of your mirror, but repeat something to yourself. Look at all the progress I've made. I can't mess this up. I'm going to keep going. I have been working really hard. It can be something as simple as that. Repeating that to yourself daily can help you start to believe it, whether you believe it or not when you first start saying it.
And then I'll circle back to something we started with when we talked about really making time for your self-care and scheduling that self-care in, that if you make the time for yourself, that will give your brain more room to be able to reframe those things. Now, we only have 1 minute left, so I do want to wrap up and just thank everybody who came today and shared some of your own experiences in the chat there. We're really excited that you came here with us, and I'm going to give Stephanie a chance to give a closing thought. And my closing thought would just remind parents and educators that you really are your best self when you take the time to take care of yourself first. And that also helps model positive practices for the children that you're around. So I would encourage you, like the title of our session today, put on your oxygen mask first before you put on those of the ones that you care for. Stephanie, how about you?
So yes, I just want to say thank you for everyone. Thank you to everyone for joining. My last thought is really just to, no matter what you are working towards right now, no matter what goals you have, give yourself grace and treat yourself kindly, because you are doing the best you can, and that's all you can do. And you're doing the best that you can for your family as well. And so, I think just really remembering that perfection is not what we're after. You have to kind of give yourself a little bit of freedom to, not be perfect. Give yourself a little bit of grace.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much. And for everyone who is here with us today, make sure to head over to peaceathomeparenting.com, because we have lots of great classes about self-care, and we'd love to connect with you on the private Facebook page or the public Facebook page as well. So we will see you soon. And thank you, everyone. Thank you so much, Stephanie.
Bye. Thank you so much.
Goodbye.